the killer applications don't exist because people don't know how to use quantum computers today. We need to enable access, let people play with it, learn it, understand it. That allows us as hardware developers to make the quickest decisions to make in the most appropriate hardware. And it's like one analogy was like asking someone to design a website before the internet exists. You just can't do it.
Quantum computing may sound like science fiction, but it's quickly becoming one of the most important topics in the tech world, with the potential to revolutionize industries from cyber to healthcare and many more. Understanding quantum computing will become increasingly important for anyone hoping to stay at the cutting edge of tech innovation over the coming years. Our guest today is Simon Phillips, the CTO of Oxford Quantum Circuits. Simon's career path is somewhat unconventional for someone in this field. He dropped out of school early to pursue his dream of working in the games industry, going on to work on classics like Championship Manager and Outrun, culminating in him setting up a games development company before moving on to the field of quantum computing in 2019. In this conversation, we explore the fundamentals of quantum computing and its likely profound impact and real-world applications. We discuss things like security, energy consumption, and the likely challenges ahead in the pursuit of quantum supremacy. We also cover the intersection of quantum and AI, and how this is quite possibly going to shape the future of computing, and much, much more. Simon's a great communicator. I learned so much from this conversation. I'm sure you will too. It is Simon Phillips. Simon, thank you so much for coming on the Tech Leaders podcast. Really excited about this one. Quantum computing is a topic that I think stimulates a lot of debate and a lot of intrigue. We've had one or two people who are very well versed in quantum, but not for quite some time. So it's great to get you on. I've been really excited about chatting to you. And also you come from a gaming background, which I
do, yes.
Which I love as well. So yeah, we always start with this question, Simon. What does good leadership mean to you?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question, because I think ultimately leadership's how we actually make sure that these things exist in our world and we kind of motivate people to do it.
Sure.
For me, I think good leadership is, it's got to come from passion initially. People need to see that you're passionate. And if you're passionate, people will naturally listen and want to follow you. But I think with passion, you've got to make sure you're, fully transparent and authentic about what it is you want to do. And I think if you can do that, then people will naturally want to follow you if they do want to follow you. And that will naturally make you a good leader. And I think it comes down to being passionate about something and passionate about people as well. I think, people are the enablers to actually achieve things. It's very hard to do things on your own. Maybe back in the day in video games, you could be a leader on your own and make something yourself and make success of it. But these times you really need to motivate people to do it. And that's any people across the world that can also join in that passion as well, I think. And if you can connect on that, then I think you can be a good leader by being authentic. It's really hard to say, to acknowledge yourself when you're a good leader. So I think it has to come naturally. But we're really keen to make sure that, as an organization, it's something I've done all the time, is as a leader, it's kind of my job to take barriers down for people and enable them to do the work. They're all experts. You kind of end up in a world of working with some incredibly smart people, some incredibly motivated people, but enabling people to take any barriers they've got down, answer any questions, and just show them that this is what we can do. These are the possibilities. Let's get on a journey together. So I think it's ultimately that. I don't think leadership really comes from a book, or you can pick up things and there's methods for doing things. But I think deep down you just got to be super passionate, transparent, and authentic, I think.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I think you just got to engage with people on an empathetic and an emotional level, and make them feel like you are on their team. You are there to support them and help them get the most out of their career. I know, obviously, we've had a bit of a chat beforehand. I know you come from a gaming background, but I know it's a great story how you got into that space. You come from a bit of an unconventional background. Can you talk through that early part of your career, how you got into gaming and how that ultimately ended up with you setting up your own business?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, for full transparent, I'm a typical kind of high school dropout. Well, typical, I don't know whether that's the right word. But all the while at school, I was really into computing and technology all the time. So there was two big passions in my life at the time. It was technology and motor racing, cars, anything with an engine.
Oh, wow.
I had a couple of friends at school that were also into technology. We used to go around each other's houses and play games, play on the Spectrum, and kind of really get motivated to it. And that kind of came to the fore. My dad bought me my first computer, which was an Atari, and we used to program it. We didn't really have a lot of games. I was really interested in, how can these lines of code that I'm reading in a book or a magazine translate into actually making things move on screen. So you sort of, learn how to program. And I didn't really think much more of it apart from as I started going through school and you start moving into your IT lessons. And the IT lessons suddenly we're going to learn how to write a document. And I'm like, I want to know how to write program that lets you write the document rather than,
Sure.
learn how to use the computer. I want to know how to make it work and what all the chips do and how they connect to each other and things like that. So I always had that kind of real big passion there. So I used to basically program my computer, stay up all night, program it, and thought I was better than the school system. And I, really wanted to do it. And my dad was my biggest motivator, actually. He was just like, well, you run the danger of flunking out of school, but if you're going to do that, make sure you do what you say you're going to do. Make sure you do make a career in games industry. Because I was kind of writing stuff, I'm thinking, this feels as good as the stuff that we're playing, the stuff that you're getting on magazines and stuff like that, and really understanding how the hardware worked. So from there, he kind of writes some demos, he writes some code, made a few games. There was an advert in my local computer shop window, basically just sort of said in handwritten note as they were stuck in the window back then, graphic artist wanted, call Roy on this number. And so I kind of called him up. We met in a pub. I didn't tell him I was kind of 14, 15 years old at the time. We met in a pub, had a couple of beers, went back to his house. He'd got his Amiga was there and he's like, well, show me what you can do and sort of tinker away on it. And then he sort of came back half an hour later. And when I spoke to him in later years, he was expecting this thing to be a disaster. You've got this young kid around it. And we kind of zoomed out and I'd drawn all these sprites and gridded them up ready to be, absorbed by the sprite editor and stuff like that. So we ended up kind of, I say knocking around. We say working together, but we didn't really have any money or we didn't make any money or anything. But we were making games, sending them off to publishers, getting responses back and just really deeply learning how it worked and how the industry worked and things like that. And then as that was kind of coming to a natural close, that's when I saw this advert at a company called Anko to work on a product called Kickoff, which was a huge soccer game.
I remember it, yeah.
And they were based in Dartford in Kent, so not too far from where I was. Yeah, the rest they say is history. So then we're working on games like Kickoff. And this is in an era where I'm young and naive. I don't really understand what's going on. The industry is not that big at this point.
Yeah.
There were no recruitment agencies. They were a thing to turn up soon. I know we mentioned that earlier, and it was only when I was at Anko for a few years, I got a call from a friend that was working there had recommended, who was the first recruitment agent I'd ever heard of.
Yeah.
And I had no idea how this is going to work. It's like, where do you want to work in industry? You've clearly got a talent for this. And I'm thinking, how much is this going to cost me? I don't have any money. And in the end, you sort of work out how the business works. Then the next thing you know, you're going to another company. And then the industry's picking up, PlayStation's come out by now and stuff like that. I moved from Anko when I was 17. I hadn't turned 18 yet when I'd moved up to Oxfordshire to get a job up here with a new studio, which was a kind of a spin out from US Gold with Jeff Brown back in the day, and still speak to Jeff quite a lot on email. And we're kind of in this world where it's like, wow, I've heard of US Gold, I've heard of this company, and I've heard of their publishers, and it was such an amazing experience. This world was kind of growing around me.
Yeah,
and we did that for a few years. And as is the game industry quite a lot, it goes through these kind of cycles. And we were there through PS2, PS3, I think, just about. And that company grew quite big. I think at one point it was Europe's largest independent game development studio. And I'd kind of gone up into the sort of management sector at the time. I was the art manager for the studio. And then when it started going into administration, that's when a few of us got together and said, which typical phrase, like, how hard can it be? Let's do our own thing.
Yeah, sure.
And then we started our own company. And I think I was, 22, something like that.
Cool. You were young then.
And then, And then we kind of went alone and it was fantastic.
And that was Gusto Games then you set up around that
That's
time?
Right, yeah, Gusto Games.
So I wanted to ask you specifically about a game that I know you were heavily involved in creating, which is Championship Manager.
Yeah.
I think there may be, I myself personally, this is certainly the case, but I'm sure there are listeners who will remember Championship Manager. I believe management games still exist, but they were very popular in the early 2000s. Right. And I know many a schoolboy spent hours up way later than they should be playing Championship Manager, trying to get into the Premier League or whatever. Talk us through how your involvement with that game came about, and if you could give us a bit of a story about how that played out.
Championship Manager always played a huge thing in my life, and we used to play it a lot on the Amiga when we were younger, and it existed in a certain form, and it's been going pretty much every year since, and it's still going under the guise of Football Manager now, with what turns out to be the very original developers of Championship Manager. But so the game we're always really fond of, and throughout my career, up until we got involved with Championship Manager, we'd always kind of made soccer games as well. So we kind of knew football engines and things like that. We worked on Kickoff, we worked on the UEFA Champions League, a Michael Owen's licensed game. We did a load of different football games. At the point when we started our own company, there was a point in the industry where the publisher IDOS owned the Championship Manager brand, and they were looking to expand it and put it on more formats and take it forwards. And a few of us at the time, before we started Gusto, went down there for an interview to go and work on the product in its current guise. And they were setting up a new team to work on it. And we kind of got to the point where, and we were like, well, we could all go and get this job. We've got this opportunity to start our own company. Let's see if we can negotiate with them and say, well, look, rather than us work for you, why don't we take on the contract for Championship Manager and make it ourselves within our company? Which we did. We took all the all the console versions and we started developing that ourselves using knowledge that we'd got. The guy that was setting up the studio used to be my old housemate back in the day. Sort of the industry was so small that there's always a connection. So we're sort of talking to someone who's quite friendly anyway. We then started speaking to some executive producers at the publisher and trying to negotiate the deal. And for me, actually, that was the first time where I'm finding myself negotiating like publishing and development contracts, which I'd never done before as my own company. We're negotiating a contract for Championship Manager, multi-year deal for Championship Manager,
Wow.
which was like, oh my God, this is fantastic. and then we went on to make Championship Manager for quite a few years, but what a fantastic product. And
yeah, it was incredible.
We had to do some interesting things. I mean, we did, I don't know if you remember the Sony PSP when that came out. So we were tasked with making a version of Championship Manager on the PSP, which was a real challenge, right? So, and the thing I loved about Championship Manager was and I think the reason it's been popular for so many years is it's not about flashy graphics or different rendering techniques. It was an immersive experience, and which is why it worked early on, right? It's like reading a book compared to watching a movie. You could really imagine what it is you're playing. And I used to play with Margate. Being from the southeast, I used to play as Margate in Championship Manager a lot, and it was great when you could play these weird teams like Bite to Jerusalem. Yeah. You can imagine in your head, the away game in Jerusalem. What does the stadium look like? It probably isn't a stadium. It's dust kicking everywhere, but you can imagine it. And I think it was kind of a shame when the early graphics came in to try and tick the boxes for 3D graphics, and you couldn't really get the same immersive experience. But we had a lot of fun with that brand, and it's so nice that it still continues as Sports Interactive as Football Manager today. Yeah. I'm pretty good friends with Miles who runs that, and we sort of see each other every now and again. Yeah, it's fantastic. What a great game. I think it must be one of the longest running series of games now, I think.
I just wanted to ask you from a technology engineering standpoint, what is your proudest achievement from your entire gaming career?
Oh gosh, I think it probably isn't so much the technology. It's probably actually the going into the leadership point of view. So I think it's when we started our own company, Gusto. I think that first time we did an actual contract, I remember being quite nervous going into the negotiations. And then suddenly you're having to learn new terminologies around, cost per person per month, how you're doing your overheads, what's OPEX, what's CAPEX, how much do the machines cost, how do you write them down, and things like that. And so for me, that learning moment was like, right, just slow down, sorry, you're 21 years old or something. And actually we did the deal for one of our first games. I'm going to point because it's just over the road from where I am now. So I'm in a pub in a village. My wife runs our local pub. Another pub in the village over the road. We did our first deal for our first independent company in the garden of that pub, which is 100 meters from where I'm sat. And me and one of my co-founders, Giles, we turned up. We're wearing shorts and t-shirts and things like that, not knowing what we're doing. We're young guys. And then these guys turn up in suits with contracts. And we're sort of sat there going, what are we doing? Again, how hard can it be, right? So we signed the contracts there and then and kind of went back and told the boys that, we're in business and we've signed a deal. But so that was a real big pivotal moment for me, from going from, saying that you can do something, how hard can it be to set up a company and blah, 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 but to actually sign a deal and then send someone an invoice for a payment and go, right, we're going to work on this product now. That was mega. That was so inspiring.
Absolutely. Quantum computing.
Yes.
Where did you first hear that term, and where did that come from in your life, Simon?
It's interesting, actually. So it wasn't really a thing in the games world. I remember kind of big data and machine learning and the quantum word would get thrown
all the
around
buzzwords.
Yeah, back in probably the early 2000, 2010, 2015, something like that. These words are kind of starting to kick around. I didn't really know about it. You kind of keep it on the peripheral, but it was, and I think it's still, kind of in people's minds at the moment, something that didn't really exist. It was like it was the Quantum Leap program was where quantum was, or, it was just this word that would end up lastly on toilet rolls and deodorants and things like that. It was
funny, when someone says quantum computing, I do actually think of Quantum Leap, bizarrely.
That's right. Yeah, no, exactly. Yeah. So it's it's something that we were aware that was kind of very deep in academic research and things like that. So it was actually quite an interesting learning curve when I first got involved with it. So I knew someone that was connected with the start of OQC. So I was kind of thereabouts. And when OQC was started, well, a year or two after, I have to look at my timelines now. I was basically asked, could I offer some advice to someone that was running OQC? So Alana was running OQC. And she basically said, like, I don't know much about business. I've got a PhD in quantum physics. Can you help me come in and understand how we work with the board, how we do X, Y, and Z? So I actually started as a commercial consultant with OQC. And at that point, I remember cramming hard, I think, of the detail of quantum. So I sort of understood at the point, like, what a quantum computer could potentially do, but didn't really understand what a qubit was, how it really worked, what I could probably put superposition in a sentence, but not really understand it. So it was a kind of an interesting journey into it, not really knowing, but I knew about business, finance, strategy, technology strategy. And that's kind of how I got into it, actually. So, it was really fortuitous. And then it basically goes back to that point we spoke about earlier about just being really kind of authentic and transparent with people and talking to the engineers that were in the company at the time and going, well, you need to explain it to me in a way I can understand it so we can really get on. And they were very respectful about going, okay, this guy knows a lot about technology, but doesn't understand it. So there was this rapid learning point of, this is how quantum computers work. And then suddenly you're like, this is actually what you're saying is a new technology, but computers work how computers have always worked, and business works how business has always worked.
Yeah.
We kind of coined this phrase of basically saying, like, not all problems are quantum problems. It's very much a lot of very smart academic people coming together to try and build this thing and like over engineering how everything's going to work. Like, the world has done a lot of this before. We can take analogies from the semiconductor world, from the video games world, from general business and strategy. And then we just concentrate really heavily on how do we make our quantum technology the best. And we've got such a lot of very passionate people that the job actually became quite easy. And then it became about, okay, let's look at the industry and work out what our strategy is to make sure our technology is the best it can be, our access is the best it can be, our trajectory and our roadmaps are really strong, and kind of really take the business from this kind of heads down academic thing to, no, actually we want to be a commercial superpower. That's where we want to go with this company. And then actually a lot of it came down to leaning on experience that I got before about taking or working in an industry where you could make a game on your own in your bedroom and sell it for something that's bigger than movies and music combined for, sort of financial output. One of the things we used to say quite a lot, actually, in video games, a lot of our pitches, we would say, we're going to make this game and it's going to change the world. And that was literally some of the things we'd come out and say sometimes. We're going to create something that's so fascinating to play with, it's going to change the world. But actually, it was only when you sort of really understand quantum physics and quantum computing, you start understanding the potential of it, that's how we're going to change the world. And that was really kind of empowering for me to do something that's bigger than games by a long stretch in terms of its impact on, humanity and its impact on technology generally. But the impact we can have with quantum computing on humanity is extraordinary. We just got to point it in the right direction.
Absolutely. And I just wanted to maybe put your teacher's hat and maybe, if you can, in layman's terms, lay out exactly. Well, let me actually have a stab at this myself and then you can tear it apart. Okay, so qubits, which form what our quantum computing is based on. Yeah. It was explained to me as, if a classical computer is like a coin, you flip it up and it land on heads or tails or 0 or 1. But with quantum computing, it lands on both every time. It has more forms than just 0 and 1. It can have multiple forms. Is that, and that's why what it makes it so powerful.
Yeah, that's basically kind of it. It's incredibly complicated. Even when you dive into it with some of the smart things about it, actually, it's really quite complicated. But we're starting to understand it, which is really great. So a classic computer, room temperature computer, whatever you want to call it, stores its information in bits, so a 1 or a 0. So you've got two states per bit. So it can be a 1, it can be a 0. A qubit, a quantum bit, you've got what's called superposition. So you can be 1, you can be 0, or you can be 1 and 0 at the same time in this superposition.
Yeah.
And then I guess the curious thing with quantum computing is you don't really know what state you're in until you observe it or you measure it, and then it will be a 1 or a 0 at the back end. But it can be 1 and 0 at the same time in this kind of weird superposition state. So you can already start imagining how you can start encoding more data on qubits than you can bits. So you've got more capacity to encode data on it. The next stretch, which really gives quantum computing its kind of superpowers, if you like, is entanglement. So that is then when I've got 2 qubits that are entangled and the state of one qubit is correlated to the state of another. So straight away, there's a good analogy the other day around a pair of gloves. So if I've got a pair of gloves, and we know, and you and I know we've got a pair of gloves, we put them in a box, we shuffle them around, I give you one glove, I take the other. You open your glove in Cardiff, you've got the left hand, you instantly know that I've got the right hand. So they're correlated. Those two things are correlated.
Okay. Yeah,
so straight away, you can start encoding more information and know the result of another qubit by measuring one because they're correlated. The spooky thing is when you start manipulating one of those entangled qubits, it will ultimately affect the state of the other, even though they can be anywhere in the universe. That's
really okay.
That's what Einstein described as spooky actions at a distance, as in when you open your glove and you can see it's the right hand, I've got the left hand, but you can do something to manipulate your glove to be the left hand and mine instantly becomes the right hand. That's weird. And that's how you start then getting these correlated kind of 2 to the n power of computation. So I can encode more data and I can encode exponentially more data on entangled superposition qubits is kind of fundamentally it. So it's all about the exponential gains that you can get. Not all problems benefit from exponential gains. I think that's kind of not a misunderstood thing about quantum computing, but can very easily get caught up in everything's going to be better because of quantum computing. And that's just not the case. Quantum computers can't add numbers. You've got probabilities of being 1 and 0 based on various environmental parameters, noise and things like that. So it's not a dead cert that you can say, well, I set this qubit to the 1 state and this to the 0 state and I'm going to add them together and get the right number. It's not going to happen. You need classical computers to do things like that.
Yeah, sure.
If you move into problem classes that require simulation of quantum mechanics, so, sort of chemistry, catalyst design, or anything that the universe has decided is basically quantum by nature, so we can start simulating that. It works in a similar kind of way. Or things that require kind of exponential optimizations or, like a machine learning. So quantum machine learning is a good case of being able to do bigger data sets and search through them quicker than conventional kind of organized search. So it's sort of unstructured searches and things like that. There are a number of big problem classes that quantum computers can definitely have a huge amount of power in. And there'll be things like, the classic one that's been around the longest, I think the one that we all heard of a lot was we can break RSA encryption with a quantum computer. So there's Shor's algorithm way back when, which is basically prime number factoring, which is how encryption's based. So, give me a big number. What are the 2 numbers that I had to multiply together, the prime factors to get that number? Classically, you'd have to search through each combination and try and work out what the pair is. But by using this kind of Shor's algorithm, this quantum algorithm, you could do something that would take billions of years of classical compute time. We'd call it impossible. And you could do that in handfuls of seconds or minutes. The computers to do it are still quite far away. We need a lot of qubits,
that's not achievable right now then, no?
Not in the hardware now, no, but the algorithm exists, the theory exists, and it's something that will exist in the future, so we should.
Will it exist in your lifetime, do you think, Simon?
Yeah, I think it will. Yeah, I think it will. I think I always say this, saying a lot, and you'll spot it everywhere in the corner. We always say within the decade. We've been saying it for 5 years, but these things are coming quicker, and the rate of development is getting much, much quicker. And actually, just to sort of jump down a slight rabbit hole with it, and the big analogy I've got with my career growing up, people ask, like, what are the killer applications for quantum computer? And by and large, outside of the theory, they don't exist. The hardware isn't powerful enough today to do really meaningful things. We can start extrapolating and breaking down problems to offer some value today, but they're not really in a position where we're going to offer, the world's biggest banks, the biggest portfolio optimizations, or the chemistry company simulation. But we can definitely see a world where they're getting there. The thing that's accelerating that, even in my career in quantum at the moment, is access to quantum hardware and the computers themselves. So the killer applications don't exist because people don't know how to use quantum computers today. We need to enable access, let people play with it, learn it, understand it. That allows us as hardware developers to make the quickest decisions to make the most appropriate hardware. And it's like one analogy was like asking someone to design a website before the internet exists. You just can't do it. The internet existed for passing bits of information around, and yet here we are doing a podcast over 200 miles with high quality audio. No one could have predicted that back when the first internet protocol ever existed. So similarly with quantum computers, the more we can give people access to them, the quicker that they can work out how to map their problems to the quantum information space, which isn't easy.
This episode was brought to you by BDigital. BDigital support leadership teams to optimize cost and get more out of technology investments. BDigital and the team have unrivaled expertise with technology license management and data remediation and are therefore perfectly positioned to help prepare organizations for AI technology capability. And on the last point, BDigital have just developed a cutting-edge AI readiness assessment, which provides tech leaders with a platform they need to make well-informed decisions about AI adoption strategy in 2024 and beyond. Go to bdigitaluk.com to find out more and get in touch. Obviously, if we crack this, then I think it's going to dramatically increase the efficacy of computational power. And what I mean is, we're going to need less computers to solve problems, which obviously has an environmental effect and an ESG effect. So, is that something that's on your radar as well? Is that sort of a driver for you? Like, just doing more with less, basically.
100%. I think there's a couple of interesting points, and this is where I think the education of where we are sort of comes into play. So for our type of modality of quantum computer, which is superconducting type of quantum computer, we have to have cryogenic. So we run at cryogenic temperatures, so about 15 millikelvin.
That increases the cost a lot, though, I suppose, doesn't it?
It does and it doesn't when you compare it to what the computational output is. So actually, when we first started, sure. And this is actually one of the big experiences of OQC, when we first started, we had a dilution refrigerator cryostat in the lab. We're like, oh, this thing uses 20 kilowatts of power. That's loads, blah, blah, blah. But actually, when you look at what you're using in classical computation,
sure.
in the real world, it pales into insignificance.
Yeah, it's like Bitcoin versus the banking system, isn't it? Bitcoin uses a lot of energy, but look at the entire international banking system uses way more. But
that's right. And we can kind of see with our power consumption, which bolt a few of the other bits to it. Let's call it 35, 40 kilowatts of power for a quantum computer today. Most of that is in the dilution unit. So we can scale those processors from, our current commercial offering is Toshiko, which is a 32 qubit system. We could potentially scale that up into thousands of qubits for the same power consumption. And when we're in thousands of qubits, suddenly we're outperforming some of the world's largest supercomputers at certain tasks. Sure. And those things are using megawatts and megawatts of power. The world's largest supercomputers today can simulate around 55, 56 qubits with all the different states they can be in. And we're talking world-leading top 5 global supercomputers. They'll be using 20 megawatts of power to simulate 55 qubits. If you add another qubit, 56 qubits, you need to double that computer. So every time you add a qubit, you have to double the power consumption. Now that's slightly unfair because why would you bother simulating a quantum system on a classical computer? You do something else to it. Sure. But in terms of the ESG angle, suddenly we can get to a world where if we can do, 20% of the computational power for 5% of the physical power consumption, that's a really nice place to be in. So actually we can see a world where even if we weren't offering a quantum advantage, like a polynomial speed up or an exponential speed up in something, to do the same job for a fraction of the power is a very useful thing for the world as we know it.
Yeah, there's a lot to unpick there and unpack there, Simon. But I really want to draw you back into real world applications, okay?
Yep. Okay.
Which real-world applications are you most excited about in the context of quantum computing capability being realized in terms of what we've talked about?
For me, I think there's kind of, I'm excited for anything that's quite near term. So by near term, I think we're talking, more early quantum simulation or quantum machine learning applications. The great thing about machine learning is you can apply it to many different things. I think most excited is quantum simulation. That's where we're going to get the things we've never been able to do before, when we can start simulating interactions between molecules. So things like drug discovery, which we know, is a huge lead time for generating new drugs that can be 10 years and cost billions of dollars. In theory, we can start stimulating that from a quantum world to a world where actually we can imagine we could just simulate something and send it straight to manufacture because it's an accurate quantum simulation. So I think advances there are going to be absolutely staggering. I think in the early days, things like catalyst designs and, new types of battery materials and things like that we'll see quite quickly. There's a lot of stuff that I'm like nerdily interested in optimization, but most of it's the banking sector. There's definitely gains. There's always gains for the banks, and all this stuff. But there's some really unique things you could do there around matching for things like increased fraud detection and things like that. And they're actually starting to come together now. There's proof of concepts happening on quantum computers today where we can kind of see that within the next few years, we'll start seeing these real applications that will exist. But it's important to stress the technology is really early. And I think, I'd love to stand up and just be, I'm confident it's going to change the world, but empirically, we're still, early in that journey. We need to, kind of increase fidelities, increase qubits, decrease errors, and all the things that we've got world experts solving at the moment.
So you mentioned obviously cyber and security a couple of times. I think what is a concern for you with quantum computing capability in the wrong hands? Does this cause an enormous security issue?
It has the potential to. I think we're seeing this sort of quantum safe encryption become a reality. And I think that's wise. I think, there is a world where at some point in the not too distant future, we'll make a machine that can unlock today's files. So we've got to be mindful of that. It's very easy to get caught in a bubble where, we're very fortunate and privileged to be in the UK and there's, a lot of security alliances with other kind of governments and regions. But there's also other governments and regions that maybe we wouldn't want to have that technology ahead of what we've got. So there's this kind of world where it slowly passes into political issues rather than technology issues, which is always shared, but it's something we definitely need to be mindful of, and we need to, be working with the right governments on to make sure that we understand what's going on in the world and we don't get necessarily caught out by other people that may have advances in other areas. So there's a few concerns around that, and we just have to be on it now. We just have to start building ethical policies. There's a few new tightenings of rules around export controls around quantum technologies, which is good, but as long as we're doing it in consultation with the tech companies that are trying to export things into certain regions. So, and we're quite advanced in so much as there's not many quantum computing companies that have made multiple quantum computers and then exporting them and run them in other countries. So we've got a Toshiko in Tokyo in a data center in Japan. So we've gone through some of the process of how do we demonstrate something in the UK, then how do we duplicate it with an engineering discipline, a bill of materials, export controls, set it up in another country and make it work for end customers to ultimately use. So we're starting to learn how the export controls are going to work. And again, this is nothing new, right? Semiconductors have done it, encryption, network switches within dual use cases, they've done it. We just need to learn from that now so we don't end up engineering ourselves in a world where we can't have many quantum computers.
Yeah, sure. Obviously, in the last couple of years, large language models have been in the news and everywhere. ChatGPT has obviously become a big buzzword, and I think it is a very incredible. It's an incredible model. As the sort of advancements in large language models and artificial intelligence technology helped you guys in any way over the last couple of years in terms of your purpose and your sort of goal of obviously achieving quantum supremacy? Has it pushed that forward at all, or has it just been a bit of a sideshow?
It definitely has influenced us, and I think largely through looking at the history of AI. So, video games back in the 90s had AI. It wasn't really AI, it was like a random number generator. Now what we're calling AI. So we've got another analogy we could lean on about how long it's taken from AI to be a buzzword to having an actual killer application, i.e. ChatGPT, or its moments. We can start tracking the acceptance of better AI. And I say better AI because there will be things to come and so on and so forth. So from that point of view, it's been a great kind of business technology analogy. The other thing we really like about it, and I get quite passionate about, and I know there's a few people in our industry talking about it, with quantum computers, we're about to create things that have more computational power than humans have ever imagined, let alone use. How are you going to program that? Like, how are you actually going to, like, we just said I can encode data that's exponentially greater than any data sets we've ever had before. I'm not going to sit down and write that in assembly language. So actually looking at how AI can help us create the tools to harness the power of what we're creating is a really interesting proposition for us. So there's been a couple of analogies. I think the main one is kind of looking at that industry and going, right, AI is now considered to be here and the industry is worth X, Y, and Z. But it was nascent at some point where we are. So what's the journey they've gone on? What were the pitfalls? And there's a lot of learnings there. But I'm really keen to start thinking about, you've got the reverse of quantum computers could probably help train models more energy efficiently or in a slightly different way, which would be really useful for the AI industry, but more about how can we look at the tools that we can generate using large language models and generative AI to help program quantum computers.
I mean, it's quite exciting when you think about the next, 10, 15 years with large language models just getting better and better. And obviously, if you chuck quantum computing into the mix, powering those large language models, then we've got an incredibly sophisticated beast there.
It's amazing.
This is like Skynet, isn't it?
It's like Skynet, but it's also, it's a bit like Skynet, but it's also, I guess, the first time anyone made a telephone call or the first time you watched a YouTube video on the internet. There's each time the leap gets slightly bigger, but it's kind of, again, these cycles happen a lot, right? And I think when I reflect on, certainly on ChatGPT, it's kind of, the analogy would have been the first time someone walked from one village to another one and said, there's a four-legged beast in my village that eats grass. And I was like, oh my God, what's this? So that's how long it took to transfer information. And then, of course, telecoms come along and suddenly you can send information across the waters and things like that. And then the internet comes along so we can share information even quicker. A lot of large language models I can just absorb so much information almost instantly by having a human tell me things that I don't even know how to search. I mean, when Google search engine came along, the type of indexing that they'd use compared to the traditional search engines was mind blowing. Suddenly it was like talking to a human the first time you ever Googled something versus searched on Dogpile or whatever the other search engines that people were using
Oh,
at the
I
time.
remember that. Yeah. Is it still going, actually?
I have no idea. But it's that kind of, again, that kind of twist in technology that is just making it much easier to absorb information, move information we could never had before. But it's not, it's not new. I mean, it's new in one sense, but it's just another evolution. But that evolution is getting more exponential. And I think quantum's going to be the same in that once we start building these things together, we're going to do things we never thought were possible before. But we'll start learning about, the new things that are on the horizon. And I'm sure there'll be something in a post-quantum era. Generally, what you have to do, it turns out, is watch Star Trek or The Simpsons. They kind of have to lead on everything.
Yeah, yeah, definitely The Simpsons. That's really exciting. You've touched upon this already, Simon, but I really would like to understand what is the biggest factor holding you guys back and holding quantum computing back at the moment. I'm guessing it's more on the hardware side.
Most things will boil down to time and money, and therefore people and, sort of number of experiments we can run. So there's a lot of scaling challenges in quantum computing. One of the big ones and most talked about ones is controlling the error rates of our processors. So qubits are very sensitive to environmental noise. So every time you make something in there, the qubit wants to entangle to, bits of metal in the sample holder and never the thing you want it to. And it's quite hard to get these noise-free results from it. There's been a few advances in technology that mean we can start creating what we're calling logical qubits, which use lots of physical qubits to transpose, more accurate data and things like that. That's just a slow process. It's just generally a slow process unless you've got infinite pots of money and infinite people to do infinite experiments to work out, should we go this way? Should we go this way? Then should we go this way? And should we go that? So that just takes time. I encourage more sharing of information and more scientific publications that help people. I hope we don't end up in a patent blockade where we just can't advance things and
everything is siloed. Yeah.
So we've got to be mindful of that. But what I think we'll start seeing is certainly companies coming together or countries coming together to start advancing technology. I think that's kind of an interesting thing. So I think that'll speed that up. Outside of that, some of the big challenges actually are in things like supply chain. How do we guarantee the supply chain for these kind of novel components that we're making? At the moment, they're like, the equivalent of Apple making the first computer in the shed. But now we've got giants like TSMC that are producing, fantastic new processes, and they're spitting out billions of chips an hour and things like that. We really need to start thinking about that in our industry. Otherwise, we're going to end up being like the first Bell Labs transistor, but trying to make generative AI with it. We've got to really think about how that whole supply chain and manufacturing industry can prepare itself for when we do go, we've now solved error correction to a point where it's doing what we want it to do. How do I then make 5 of them or 10 of them or 100 of them or 1,000 of them? We need to make sure that area exists. And that's a real, I'm going to say as far as a concern today, but one of the avenues and paths are that we end up working with TSMC and all of our quantum technology ends up in a factory in Taiwan or something like that, where we're just repeating the same things that we have security issues over today. So let's try and make sure we don't do that. And I think that's one of the big things that will hold us back in the future. So getting on top of the export controls, getting on top of post-quantum encryption to make sure we're not stopped or blocked. So there's a number of things like that, but there are scaling challenges everywhere. Most of them have been solved before, and the really tricky quantum physics-based ones, I'm confident we've got the right people to do it.
Moving on to more generalist matters then, okay, I wanted to ask you about, obviously, seems like you're a bit of a futurist. You get excited about innovation, as do I. I'm curious as to how do you think humans will interact with technology? What will be the next phase of interaction? Because we interact with technology at the moment via laptops and phones, our fingers, our thumbs, our eyes. Do you think that will evolve into something in some other way? I know neural implants have been spoken about, and Google have tried to develop glasses and interact with your eyelids and sort of things. What's your thoughts on that?
I think, we're in an interesting space at the moment, even with our mobile phones, right? And it's funny that we still call them phones. I don't know the last time I actually made a phone call on it. And I think we've kind of got that down. I think what we need to make sure is we're creating technology whereby no one really knows or cares that it exists. So again, we're doing this podcast remotely. We're probably hitting 5 data centers, probably a few megawatts of power for a short space of time, but we don't care. We just solve our problems. And I think we need to make sure we develop technology in a way that, if someone's the world's leading catalyst designer within their job, that they can go and carry on being the world's leading catalyst designer, but their results just got better. So I don't think we'll create a new way of interacting with our computers. I think we still have steering wheels on cars. We'll still have a mouse and a keyboard. Yeah. The phones prove that we can be really good there. I think I'm secretly childishly excited for neural implants. I think what an amazing world, but we've got to be ethical about it. I think, was there someone that used one the other day just to play Civilization all night or something, which is like, well, I can
really?
Yeah, that was the thing.
Did it work well?
I don't know the detail. I don't think the experience was quite as good as just sitting at your computer playing Civilization, but I thought it was an interesting
No.
first stab at it. But I think that's quite interesting. If it's more about how quickly we can absorb information, is how we interact with it. And, phones have done a really good job of getting all the information we need in the shortest space of time, but it's still in a world. And I think it's important sometimes. This comes back to what I like about being in a pub and, being involved with the pub. Sometimes we've got to humanize it and, the excitement should come in. Sometimes we do need to switch some stuff off and just talk to people. I think that's something that we're in danger of losing a lot of the time, right? I mean, we've done wonders for communication with things like remote calls and video calls and all the things we can do. That's great. We can talk to people more often, but actually we've got to make sure we keep that human element as well. Hopefully we don't end up like the Matrix where we become the most cost efficient way of powering the AI model.
Yeah. we get grown.
Yeah, no, that's exactly it. But no,
like vegetables.
we are amazing data process, and I think we have to remember
Yeah.
that. So it's about absorbing information. I think is the key to the future.
Yeah, we haven't quite got as good as Mother Nature at creating advanced beings quite yet,
no.
But we're getting there. We made a lot of progress.
That's right.
In the last couple of years, at least. So you're a busy chap, Simon. Obviously, you're on the board and part owner of a quantum computing company. You're obviously a passionate technologist. You do things like this quite often as well. What is your sort of productivity advice for the listeners, and how do you achieve balance in your life?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. I think I've definitely ebbed and flowed and been successful at achieving balance and not successful at achieving balance. When it comes down to that humanizing element as well, I think I enjoy getting obsessed by things. I'm very excited, very passionate. We'll dive in deep. And my advice there would be just take an attitude of how hard can it be? Don't put barriers up, break things down into small problems and just get stuck in. Just let yourself immerse in something. And you'll very quickly understand, oh, this is really, or the bit you're excited in, you'll be better at, rather than the bit you're not excited in. That's not great, like homework and revision advice. I'd tell my kids when they're revising, you actually try and do some of the hard stuff first and then enjoy the bit you enjoy later. But I think in terms of developing technologies and business, the productivity is you just get excited by it and you'll soon jump through it, I think.
Sure.
But in terms of balance, I think as we kind of got a bit older, we won't say how old, but we're getting older and we're getting more mature. I think it is that it's important to find time for humans. You'll make your best decisions when you're not thinking about them. I used to enjoy long distance running, marathon running, and what a great time to actually unfold problems in your head and come back with clarity. Sometimes what feels like tight, gritty problems, go and have a pint with a friend, go for a jog, and you'll soon go, I don't even know what I was worried about. Actually, I need to do A and then B and just unfold it in your head there. So
yeah, sure.
Yeah, I think I'm going to go back with a human context. I think if you can actually build human relationships, you'll solve those problems for the moment. You want to allow yourself to get obsessed and excited about something. But yeah, I think that's probably.
Absolutely.
Or play video
Great
games.
advice.
I don't know.
Yeah, why not? Especially retro video games.
There we go.
Specifically. So looking back now then, Simon, obviously I know you've probably got a lot of your career left to go, but looking back in your armchair now with your cigar, what would you say to your 20? Well, actually, I normally say 21-year-old self, but your career started very early.
Yeah.
So let's say, what advice would you give to that 15-year-old kid who first got a job in the games industry all them years ago? What advice would you give to that guy?
I mean, that's a really great question, and I still feel like that guy. I think that's the thing. Sometimes you still feel the energy when you go like, we're just going to do it. We're not going to be bothered by how hard this is going to be. Let's just do it, and we'll solve the problems on the way. And I think that's probably it. I think it's just to have some confidence. We're all humans. Those guys in the suits doing a deal with me and Giles in our t-shirt, they're just humans. They go and see their friends. They go out for beers. They go for a jog and things like that. So don't be off put by an industry standing or letters after someone's names. We're all as equal as each other. We're so fortunate. We've got this wonderful, diverse world of people, but we're all equal. So there's no hierarchy when it comes to doing something or creating something new. It's a case of, if I can be more passionate about it and get on with it, I can make it and I can bring people on that journey. Yeah. So I think it is, don't worry about being in front of people and talking to people. They're just humans. We're all just humans at the end of the day. So I think that's the advice. I think there's probably, whether I could have done anything quicker or bigger or faster, I don't know. But there's definitely times where you're like, oh, I feel awkward going to pitch this thing to that person because it's this huge big company or things like that. And I'm very pleased and surprised. Sometimes the opportunity that I've had to move industry was really enlightening for me, to go from an industry that I really understood and I knew nearly everyone in it, and you knew how the deals worked. You could look at a video game and you could predict how many people it took to make and how much it cost and how they did it. And to actually then switch to a whole new industry of very near zero knowledge about quantum and things like that. And then to be able to just navigate that industry because I'd learned not to really, not care isn't the right word, but not be put off by the fact that I'm going to go and talk to a scientist from the University of Oxford. Just approach it because he's just a human and I'm just a human. We can talk at a level, and it's about me being open with my feedback and them being open with their feedback. That there'll be things that I know that he doesn't know. He's smart in one area and I'm smart in another area, but we can talk to each other as humans and make things happen. So it is kind of parking the egos. I think, the sooner we park egos, the quicker we get through things. But be confident. There's no sense in a world where you should be too ego empty. That doesn't help anyone, but just getting that right balance. And a lot of it comes with maturity and age and experience. But I think back then, if I could have said just do that, don't be put off by things. Don't get egotistical.
Yeah.
You'll just navigate through.
Believe in yourself.
I 100% believe in yourself. I think that's what it is. There's always that. And then don't drink anything bigger than your head.
Don't go to Oktoberfest and have too many steins then, eh? Last one then. We always ask guests, I'm not sure if you're much of a reader, Simon, but if you've got a book recommendation or anything that's inspired you recently, if you're not much of a book reader.
Just recently, actually, I read a book called Chip War, which is
not heard of that one.
Absolutely fascinating. I think this is where it was recommended by some of the one of the tech directors at OQC. He'd read it. Someone else had read it. And it's basically the story of the development of the transistor and then the geopolitical power plays and things like that. So from the first transistor that was invented right through to, the TSMCs of the world and how they're mass produced and things like that. And it was, so it's kind of a bit of a history lesson, but like a modern history lesson. And the number of analogies for scales of business, something that's gone from a few people in a lab creating this switching device to how big and how ubiquitous transistors and semiconductors and things are today. It's a great kind of analogy for anything can grow into anything and the pitfalls that we should look along the way. So that was one of the few books I found myself absorbing myself into very deeply. And actually, there's been a lot of lessons in that. We're like, this is the journey we're on. We're in exactly that space. We're in that early transistor space with our qubits. But we can assume the industry is going to look like the semiconductor industry in terms of scale and proficiency in the future. So let's learn from it, and let's be prepared, things like that. But yeah, Chip War, what a great book that was.
Yeah, it's a fascinating industry, isn't it? Look, I'm keen to understand, really, Simon, just a bit of a bolt-on question. Jensen Huang was on TV, on quite a clip went viral recently on YouTube and things about him saying that AI is going to kill the software engineering vocation, not kill it, but, heavily impact it. What's your thoughts on that? Do you agree?
Didn't we say that when, abstract languages like C and C++ came out and it's going to kill assembly language? And it's another layer of abstraction. I think as you were just learning how to do things differently, I think it's going to open software development up to a wider audience, which is good. That can only be a good thing. But there's still those fundamental skills will always be useful. I think if you know how to program a computer, you'll sure as hell get a generative model to create something better than someone that doesn't, because you kind of understand how it works at a hardware level. So I don't think it's going to kill it. It's definitely going to change it. And I think it's going to change it for a really nice way. I think there's challenges coming up around intellectual property and, how who's going to be willing to put their coding ideas or their logic ideas into a model when other people are going to benefit from it. So I think there's going to be a few challenges like that coming up. But it's definitely going to change the landscape. And I'm excited for that. I think, that's coming from being a programmer. I think we all have to evolve our skills and evolve the way we work because the world changes, But excited.
Yeah.
Excited for it.
I was saying to somebody the other day, the biggest winners from AI are going to be the corporate law firms.
Yeah, that's right.
It's going to be a lot of litigation over the next 20 years, that's for sure.
No, exactly.
Simon, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much. I could chat to you all day. But yeah, it's been really, really informative and some lovely anecdotes. Thank you so much for coming on the Tech Leaders podcast.
Thank you for inviting me. It's been a real pleasure.
Oh my, where do we start with that? Simon is one of those rare individuals who is clearly very technically minded alongside being a rather gifted communicator. That combination is normally magical for a podcast guest. But of all the brilliant things we discussed, two things stood out for me. Firstly, it has to be said, Simon has had a great career to date and has much more to come, I'm sure. But all of this, despite the fact he dropped out of school early and didn't go to university, bearing in mind he's working in a world full of PhDs, full of academic credentials, and Simon's had a fantastic career not pursuing any of those things. And I think it's quite a profound uncovering, and testament to the more practical learners within us who gravitate away from theoretical things and academia, more towards practical learning. I thought that was really interesting. And obviously not forgetting some of the incredible points and explanations Simon made on quantum computing. Simon truly believes that ubiquitous quantum computing is coming, and it's coming soon. And this will quite possibly transform many industries, will foster groundbreaking research, and much, much more. Such is the power of this technology. So I'm absolutely looking forward to see how this plays out. And it's certainly, I've been inspired to go and do more research on this topic. Lots of food for thought. But thank you so much for tuning in. We really appreciate it. Please don't forget to subscribe, download, and possibly even leave a review. It really helps us find more great guests and bring you more great content. This episode was brought to you by Be Digital. Be Digital support leadership teams to optimize cost and get more out of technology investments. Be Digital and the team have unrivaled expertise with technology license management and data remediation, and are therefore perfectly positioned to help prepare organizations for AI technology capability. And on the last point, Be Digital have just developed a cutting-edge AI readiness assessment, which provides tech leaders with a platform they need to make well-informed decisions about AI adoption strategy in 2024 and beyond. Go to Be Digital UK to find out more and get in touch.